Welcome to the second to last Toastmasters meeting where I get to be president. So glad that we were all here and I can see your beautiful smiling faces. And since Rob is not here, who has our flag?
I have a flag.
Fabulous. I'm going to pass it over to you, Ms. Pat.
Okay, if everyone will mute themselves, please, while I recite it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Now I'm going to introduce our illustrious Toastmaster, Mr. Steve Schwind, who does not need any special effects to have his facial foliage, which looks very sharp, by the way.
You can see that.
No studio effects needed for you. Take it away, Steve.
I painted that on just a little bit ago. Thank you. Welcome everyone to this week's Cascade Speakeasy Toastmasters meeting. I remember the first time I did Toastmasters and I totally butchered that. I was like, what's the name of this club? I finally got it down. Only took about 4 or 5 years. I am happy to see that we have a full contingent, it appears, and we are ready to roll with one speaker in the house. I wonder if someone has a joke to share with us this evening. Looks like Eric's got something to amuse us with.
Did you have one, Selena? Oh. An old man lived alone in New Jersey. He wanted to plant his annual tomato garden, but it was very difficult as the ground was very hard. His only son, Vincent, who used to help him, was in prison. The old man wrote a letter to his son and described his predicament. Dear Vincent, I am feeling pretty sad because it looks like I won't be able to plant my garden this year. Just getting too old to be digging up a garden plot. I know if you were here, my troubles would be over. I know you would be happy to dig the plot for me like in the old days. Love, Papa. A few days later, he received a letter from his son. Dear Pop, don't dig up that garden where all the bodies are buried. Love, Vinny. 4 a.m. the next morning, FBI agents and local police arrived and dug up the entire area without finding any bodies. They apologized to the old man and left. That same day, the old man received another letter from his son. Dear Pop, go ahead and plant the tomatoes now. That's the best I could do under the circumstances.
Good one.
Thank you for that little bit of amusement. I have to say it was kind of amusing. I glanced away before Eric got started. And when I looked back, I thought there was somebody climbing through my monitor to see what I was doing. That background that you have, Jackie, makes you look like the star that you are. But you were like right up there looking into my space, man. It's kind of amusing. I guess I'll keep things moving and I'll ask our general evaluator, Barbara, to come to the front of the room.
Or Vicky.
What
Barbara's
happened?
not
Where'd
here.
that change happen?
Yeah, that's okay. All right, so I'm general evaluator this evening and I will be evaluating the meeting as a whole. But I have a team who will be helping me with that. And I would like to call on our evaluator who will be evaluating Jackie's speech, Mary. Mary, will you tell us what you'll be doing this evening?
I'd be glad to. Jackie is giving the final speech of the Engaging Humor Pathway, and this is the Reflect on Your Path speech. The time on this is 10 to 12 minutes, and Jackie's title tonight is Mirror, Mirror Up the Steps.
Thank you. And this evening we have our timer, who is Eric. Eric, will you tell us what you'll be doing?
My pleasure. Toastmasters, we practice time limits. Rarely do we have as much time as we want. We're usually part of a program, or we are given an allotted time for our frame. Toastmasters, we time the speeches, the evaluations, and the table topics. And I have these cards that I will hold up. Jackie's speech is 10 to 12 minutes. At 10 minutes, the green card will come up. At 11 minutes, the yellow card will come up. And at 12, the red card will come up, and we should try and wrap up in 30 seconds. Table topics is 1 to 2 minutes. 1 minute, the red card comes up, 1:30, the yellow, and 2, the green card. The evaluation has 2 to 3 minutes. 2 minutes, the green card comes up, 2:30, the yellow, and 3, the red card. And I will keep track and give my report when called upon. Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you very much. Our grammarian this evening is Pat. Pat, will you tell us what you'll be doing?
Yes, my job will be to recognize all of the wonderful use of the English language that you as a speaker and everyone else as speakers will do tonight, how you embroider it, how you enhance it, how you articulate it. In other words, how you honor our language. Part of my job also is to introduce the word of the day. And since our theme was what will normal look like, I decided to look up synonyms for normal. There are hundreds, depending upon how you're describing things. So what I focused on is this word. The word is prosaic. Prosaic. My marker was misbehaving when I was writing, so there it is, prosaic. And what prosaic means is either commonplace or dull, matter of fact or unimaginative, or the ordinary form of spoken or written language rather than poetry. So I don't expect to hear any prosaic language tonight. I expect to hear elegant language. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. And the odd counter for this evening is Christina. Christina, will you tell us what you'll be doing?
Yes. One of the things we strive to do in Toastmasters is eliminate filler words, things that we use to replace pauses that naturally would happen, repetitions, things in our speech that would distract our audience from our message. Tonight, I'll be counting the filler words that pop in, words like or overuse of the word and, beginning sentences with well, but, so, the word like, the phrase you know, repetitions, and others. I will report when called upon to do so. I will be keeping my head down because otherwise I get distracted by the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. And I will be back at the end to reintroduce my team and then to give my evaluation. At this time, I would like to turn our meeting back over to our Toastmaster, Steve.
Thank you. Great to know what we're up for with our general evaluation team. I have the pleasure of introducing a stellar speaker who resides in our midst. She's done a great job with entertaining speeches over the time that she's been attending our meetings and is always a pleasure to listen to, never the prosaic speaker. Jackie is finishing up her final project of her 3 pathways. Would you join me tonight in hearing her tell us about the message behind Mirror, Mirror Up the Stairs? Jackie Graybill.
I have a confession to make. This may be surprising, but I love pathways. What do you think about when you think of pathways? Maybe put it in the chat for me or unmute yourself and tell me, when you were first introduced to pathways, what did you first think about it? Either unmute or put it in the chat for me. Ooh, Vicky was excited. I like it. Anything else? Challenged, confusing. Yes. Well, when I first met Pathways, ooh, opportunities for professional growth. I love that perspective, Pat. When I first met Pathways, it was anything but love at first sight. We were introduced by my mentor in Nashville. She said, Jackie, I want to introduce you to Pathways. I think this is going to be a beautiful relationship. I responded by being a little bit confused about it. Like a first date, there was a setup. I was looking Pathways up and down. I don't know. Pathways doesn't seem charming. Pathways, it's not a lot to look at. I don't know. And for a while, I ignored Pathways. Oh, I did my icebreaker fairly quickly, but then I just ignored Pathways. I was Toastmaster. I was the timer. I was the evaluator. I did everything until that fateful day when I received an email from Rob that said, would you like to be our president? I got really excited. And then I had this thought. If this club thinks enough of me to lead them as their president, they believe in me enough to start speaking when we need more speakers. There was only one problem though. To do this, I had to get to know Pathways. The website. But then, as I got to know Pathways, my perspective started changing. I started realizing wonderful character qualities of Pathways that I had previously missed. And I became glad that I didn't just write Pathways off that first day by judging a book by its cover. My history with Pathways started with the mastery pathway, the presentation mastery pathway. That was the one that I did the test. And out of the 11 paths, that's what I got. But then I chose this pathway that we're going to talk about. Pat. Got myself there. That's the presentation mastery. I wanted to work on my humor because I thought I might be a little amusing, but am I really funny? And this has been the most challenging pathway for me. Pretty soon after I started this pathway, though, I discovered that Pathways was giving me a gift. Like breakfast in bed, I got a freebie, a new path. And I started almost in tandem with this one, the coaching pathway, effective coaching. I am going to give you a visual by sharing my screen that shows a little bit of what my journey looked like with this particular path. For those of you who are interested, this is a fun resource called Jamboard. All right. Some of you are familiar with pathways, and some of you may not have started your pathway yet. It has 5 levels in it. Once you're at the bottom and you begin with your icebreaker, as you see there on the bottom, every single path has the same projects in level 1. You have your icebreaker, evaluation and feedback 1, evaluation and feedback 2, which is where you start putting into practice the feedback you have received, and then your research and presenting. Once you jump up to level 2, that intro to Toastmasters mentoring is also the same across all of the paths. This is the part in your relationship with pathways that is what everyone else sees. This is the part on the dating profile. This is what everyone gets. Once you get past that, though, your relationship with pathways starts to become more, to use a British word I am adoring right now, bespoke, custom, unique to you and your relationship, your deepening, burgeoning relationship with your pathway. Level 2 of the humorous pathway has a connect with your audience. This is the required path project that is in several of the other pathways. But know your sense of humor, that one is unique to this particular path. Knowing my sense of humor was an interesting deep dive into what I think is funny. It's interesting when I sit and watch movies or TV shows with people. Sometimes they laugh at things that I don't think are funny. And sometimes I just crack up. And the other person is sitting there, maybe with a smile on their face. This is realizing that we all have a different sense of humor, but what we bring to our presentations is as unique as the individual experiences that we each have with pathways. Once you get to level 3, it becomes even more fun because you get to choose electives. The elective I really enjoyed was focus on the positive. And I remember doing my journaling about this around the time that I was moving and journaling about that move. And it was so powerful to be reading that, to be reading back about my experience of coming back from the UK and coming into a situation where my family was facing COVID, and to have that grounding thought of journaling about having something positive in my life at that time, that was really, really powerful. Once I got to level 4, things got interesting. The power of humor in an impromptu speech. It was fun, but it scared me spitless. I had 10 prompts that would get chosen, and I had to try and make them funny in the moment. That was a challenge. It was like table topics on steroids. But if I could, I would do that project more than once. Maybe I will go back and do it just for the fun of it, because it was a challenge, a fun challenge. The one speech project that I have done across all 3 speeches is in level 5, the prepare to speak professionally. The fun thing about paths is you can speak outside of Toastmasters. And as long as you have a recording of that a Toastmaster can review, it'll count towards your path, which is fabulous, because if you have anything at your job or, like me, grad school, you can count it towards your path and get that credit. What ended up happening for me with this is that in my graduate studies, we had a student-led conference. I was asked to speak at this, which was very exciting. And what I ended up doing was combining prepare to speak professionally with the level 4 elective of the question and answer session. And I recorded this and sent it to a Toastmaster friend, my mentor here in the UK, and he reviewed it for me. He gave me an evaluation, sent me the evaluation, and I was able to count that for both projects, which was extremely fun. I put off the final speech, besides the bonus speech, this one, deliver your message with humor, because it was such a challenge to think about having to be funny. And finally, last week, I decided I'm just going to do it. Was it as funny as it could have been? Probably not. But I'm still growing in my humorous skills. And this club gives me a safety net to try new things, to go out in a blaze of glory and crash and burn and know that I am going to be caught. I'm not going to fall. What is your relationship with pathways? You may not have a close relationship with pathways yet, but I challenge you, go on a date with pathways. Maybe grab a cup of tea, or if you're feeling brave, even a glass of wine. Who knows? Maybe you will end up falling in love with pathways. Thank you.
Well, that was a lovely speech, an informative speech and an inspiring speech. Timer, could we have a minute on the clock to share our thoughts with Jackie, please? I defy anyone to find a shred upon which they can hold to define any one sentence, and that is a prosaic offering to the masses here.
That is 1 minute.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Timer. You've done an excellent job with timing. You're right up there on the level of Jackie's speech. Now is a fun time to expand all of our individual skills as we take on the challenge of a question from Selena, our table topics master. Selena?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Table topics gives us all opportunities to practice our impromptu speaking. They help train us to quickly organize and express our thoughts. You can think of table topics as a mini speech with an opening, a body, and a conclusion. This also provides a speaking opportunity for any member who is not on duty, but I am going to call on all of you this evening. Your speech length will be expected to be between 1 and 2 minutes. I encourage all of you to use the word of the day, which is prosaic. And here are your challenges. The coronavirus pandemic has exerted enormous pressure on American society and forced a host of changes to how we live and work. Those pressures have ebbed and flowed with the outbreak's progress. When it all recedes, in the likely not too distant future, experts expect older, more familiar or prosaic ways of doing things to return, undoing some of the changes we've seen since last March. Victoria, can you tell us about something that has changed for you during the pandemic that you expect will go back to the way it was, a more prosaic way, before the restrictions started?
Well, thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. I can think of a couple things that changed, but are going to go back to normal in a sense. Is first of all, the movie theaters. They shut down because they were no longer a safe environment for us to be in. And I have been to 3 movies since the theaters have started opening up. And they have progressed, because at first it was that we were still supposed to be wearing our masks unless we were partaking in the movie theater popcorn and so forth like that. And my first movie, there was only a couple other people in there. And I think people are just waiting to see. Every time I go, there seems to be a few more people, but we're keeping our distance and we're not sitting near one another. And they're no longer requiring us to wear masks and following the new protocol. And so that's changed a little bit. And then I've been following the progress of Disney parks, because those are one of my favorite things. And so I watch updates on what is happening. And when they first opened back up, they had line markers and they had shields in between when you were riding a ride, like one of Lloyd's favorite rides, It's a Small World. They had partitions on each one with plexiglass so that there was this barrier. Well, I got notification last week that plexiglass on rides is now disappearing on the rides at Disneyland. And so I'm thinking that we're slowly going back to what we remember before the pandemic, Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Victoria. That was excellent. Harvard experts say some of our adaptations to the pandemic have accelerated already existing trends, like the development of a cashless society, the increase in remote work, and the decline of brick and mortar retail. And they expect some of these will become a more permanent part of the post-pandemic's new normal. Jackie, what is something that has changed for you that you expect will be part of your new normal after restrictions are lifted?
Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. I think working online is something that has changed quite a bit. I would never have imagined that I could be a part of this Toastmasters group from across the pond. One interesting thing that happened to me this last week is I started teaching piano lessons on Zoom. This is the very first time that I've done this, and it actually worked really well. I could see myself getting future piano students and teaching them over Zoom. But also, I think that even though in-person speaking is here to stay, after restrictions end, we will have both. It won't be just in person, it will also be online, which opens things up for speakers. Somebody could be speaking at a conference or doing a training, and they wouldn't have to travel to that location. I know my speaking coach, Chris, has taught all over the world, 15 different countries so far. And that's exciting because that means our connections are exponential. That means I could go and do a pathways presentation to Toastmasters groups all across Europe, across the world, and gain more experience as a speaker while making those same connections. I am excited about that. The world's becoming more global in an exciting way. That means more travel, and I am here for it.
Thank you, Jackie. It is expected that the psychiatric effects of the pandemic will be both acute and long-lasting, similar to those wrought by economic depression and war. Unlike shocking events that punctuated recent generations, like the Kennedy assassination or the Challenger disaster, the duration and widespread personal impacts, like the deaths of loved ones and losses of jobs and businesses, is similar to what we're experiencing now. The times are particularly difficult for those growing into adulthood and finding their place in the world. Lloyd, can you tell us something that will endure in your life that will resonate with you from these last 2 years of experiencing a pandemic?
Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. Actually, no. And the reason for that is that I'm a pretty resilient person. I don't tend to see obstacles or barriers or whatever as obstacles or barriers. I just see them as things that need to be deflected or gotten over or under or around or through. So not really. I was thinking about the way you expressed that question, whatever the source was. Young people who experience these extremely disastrous events may suffer for it. Well, I was thinking about the so-called greatest generation, who were all young people just before the Great Depression and World War II. They came through those two things back to back, if you think about it. And that was roughly 15 years of really bad stuff. I mean, far in excess of anything we were experiencing. And somehow they seem to do okay. In fact, that's why they're called the greatest generation. I have a strong feeling that in the end, what's going to happen is that some new crisis or event or whatever will supplant this one in everybody's narrow focus of attention, and we'll more or less get over it. If you need some proof of that, ask yourself, how many times did you think about the 9/11 attacks today? The answer is 0. You didn't think about them at all. Even though, if you remember when those happened, those were considered events that were going to shape the future of America forever. No, they didn't. And I don't think this pandemic will either, any more than the one 100 years ago did. Back to you, Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Lloyd, for putting all of this that we're experiencing right now into the appropriate context. I agree with you. Very hopeful outlook. Living during the pandemic has forced many of us into social isolation, in-person meetings, to Zoom, and has seen us missing milestone moments like graduations, weddings, retirements, and anniversaries. Mary, can you tell us about a milestone moment that happened for you or a loved one during the pandemic and how you marked that occasion?
and how I marked that occasion. When you ask for events, I can tell you that in my extended family, we lost 7 people this past year and were unable to really give honor to those who have passed on. All of them were older. They were of my, pardon me, my parents' generation. So these largely were people in their 90s. So I have to celebrate that they got a long run of it. And they led big, full lives. I did have one cousin of my generation who likely passed away from complications of COVID-19. But again, we're unable to gather together and do her honor and justice. But on July 31st this year, our annual family reunion will come back into being. We will see each other in person. We will give honor to those that we've lost in this past year who can no longer attend our reunions. And I think that is the lasting legacy, is to know how important it is to honor people when a milestone happens in life, how precious it is to be able to get together in person and pay our respects and celebrate, or even be sad together. There's just something that's more special and meaningful when you can do it in person rather than in this milieu of faces. Zoom is great, but it is rather prosaic in trying to be emotional and face-to-face with one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and so sorry for your losses. This last couple of years has been hard for a lot of us. One function of the shutdown was forcing those unfamiliar with applications like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Google Meets to take the plunge and learn. And what many learned is it's not as hard as they thought. Steve, what is something you learned, besides driving on Zoom, as a result of the pandemic that helped develop a skill that you will continue to use?
Thank you, Ms. Table Topics Master. I don't know that I've really picked up a skill as a result of Zoom. I think Toastmasters is opening the door to our growing skills via Zoom, which is a super thing. Finding good ways of doing our presentations on Zoom is a real skill to pursue, to be able to present ourselves well, remain interesting, and not have people multitasking is crucial. Jackie's speech that she just did is evidence of a successful delivery, a successful presentation that held everybody's interest 110%. Or animation or professionalism, enthusiasm, it all just came across. That's the benefit that I see of this, and she took the bull by the horns and made it work, and we all need to pursue that, I think. Zoom has, in my mind, opened the door to us recognizing and understanding how much we can do remotely. I think a lot of businesses are going to be at the point where they recognize that it's more cost effective to have a Zoom meeting or even employee interactions from their remote locations versus piling into that brick and mortar location. It's been interesting, and that's the beauty of human nature. It's so resilient, finds ways to work with things that we're presented with, new tools that provide a springboard of growth. That's the benefits that I've seen from life on Zoom. Thank you, Ms. Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Steve, for letting us zoom in on your life during the pandemic. Working remotely has enabled workers to maintain a stable financial footing despite the crisis. It also has saved time on commuting and allowed closer tabs on children and families. Patricia, Please share an example of how the changes in society, workplace, shopping, etc., has been a positive change either for you personally or society in general.
For me personally, using Zoom has been very positive in terms of Toastmasters and other organizations in which I'm involved. And it enabled me to keep connections that were important to me in those areas. I would say shopping online isn't my favorite thing. Excuse me very much, but I like to go to the mall and stroll through and look at things, and I'm not willing to give that up. I watched my grandchildren learn on Zoom. And what was interesting to me in comparing their experiences is Liam had already done a year of being in school in classrooms, whereas Liv's experience in kindergarten this past year was totally online. So when school began to meet personally, it was a total adjustment for her. So I can see advantages and disadvantages as an educator in terms of learning opportunities, being able to reach more and distant students. And yet, again, as an educator, I think that a great deal has been lost in terms of the interpersonal dynamics and learning that is important, especially to young children in school. I think we will not be putting this behind us. I think that people will think of even more creative ways to use Zoom. If you look at Jackie as an example, she's already thinking of it as an opportunity to travel. I got to think about that. I used to write a travel column a number of years ago, and I had to give up my 80th birthday present to myself last year, which was my trip to Machu Picchu, because of this epidemic. So I have to think about that. That was very inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. We probably have time for at least one more. One opportunity that the pandemic has presented is to repurpose roadways designed for cars into pedestrian or cycling zones. Christina, if you had the ability to make a change from a car-centric to bike or pedestrian center urban design in your community, what or where would you envision that change?
Thank you, Selena. I'm not a bike rider. It seems to me our community has an awful lot of bike safe routes and amenities now. As a motorist, the changes on First Street drive me absolutely crazy. For any of you who have driven down First Street, there's a roundabout at every intersection. They are not gentle roundabouts. If you aren't paying attention or you're driving in the winter, you will smash your bumper against the roundabout. Not a good thing. The whole idea was to slow traffic down so people could ride bikes up and down First Street. In our experience of walking up and down First Street, which we frequently do, we have seen a total of 2 bicyclists on First Street. Maybe they don't like the roundabouts either. I do have friends who like to ride their bikes on the riverfront. I think that is a great place. The riverfront loop gives people opportunity to ride at a leisurely pace, to enjoy the scenery and the valley, to share the path with pedestrians in a safe way. It seems that the bike enthusiasts have already done a very good job of accommodating the roads and paths for their use. Thank you, Selena.
Thank you, Christina. And we are now at the 6:15 mark, so I will turn the conversation back over to our Toastmaster, Steve Schwind.
I am a cyclist, and I have for the life. Actually, I know who was largely instrumental in the construction of those stupid roundabouts on First Street. It's beyond me what they were thinking when they put those things in. At the same time, Christina, don't go to China or Amsterdam because you're going to get run over by a bike. They're a great, fabulous mode of transportation. They're great for general relaxation and entertainment and good for your health. That's all I'm going to say about that. I had something else to say, but seems to have escaped me at the moment. Looks like a good time to turn this over to Vicki, our general evaluator. Vicki, take it away.
All right, thank you so much. I am going to call on my first team member who evaluated this speech, Mary.
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you, Jackie, for giving us another entertaining speech. I very much enjoyed it and looking forward to it too. I would have to say just overall that you have been mentored out of being an amateur speaker. You are among the best of them. And folks, nobody does mentors like Jackie does. So she's a super protege, and I really honor and respect you for that. First of all, I'd like to talk about some of the things that I really liked about your speech, and it was mostly to do with your presentation. You made a really good use of interactive communication, asking for comments on the chat or even somebody to blurt something out. That just makes it easy for people to participate and just give you a little sprinkling of what they're thinking. But I also appreciate that you are able to just extemporaneously respond to people's comments. I think that makes it a very fresh speech. Now let's talk about your facial expression. There was a point where you were talking about pathways, and you just pinched your face up like you were eating something tart. It was a perfect expression for pathways, and I think we could all relate to it. But your expressions really back up what you're saying. You've got that coordination going. It's a very effective way to emphasize your speaking. So is your vocal variety. Your acting genes just kick right in, and you're so entertaining. It makes us want to listen to you. We want to hear more. I'm glad it was a 10 to 12 minute speech. Your presentation, excellent. The background, your grooming, the solid color top, we are focusing on you and what you have to say. Now, a few things that I think that you could improve upon. I did hear a few cliches in there. Judging a book by its cover was one of them. Pick those out of your speech if you have time and try to come up with something original, something that we would just sort of laugh at. And engaging humor is a perfect time to do that, to be humorous. Now, the Jamboard, I was really looking forward to this. I actually had to go and look and see what Jamboard was. Initially, I thought it was rather busy, and I had to quit listening for a minute to figure out what the graphic was. But as you kept speaking, I have to say, on the other hand, it helped us traverse the engaging humor path. I had another comment about the title, and I didn't understand what the connection was with mirror, mirror. What was it again? Mirror, mirror. Oh, something about step. Mirror, mirror up the steps. And then I realized mirror, mirror is a play on words for reflecting on your path, and up the steps was the graphic. I think you could have made it a little more obvious, and I see the red flag there. So I'm going to jump over to what I really, really liked. 3 things on the overview. How far you have come. You were supposed to explain that to us. A year ago, you'd given maybe 1 speech. A year later, you've completed 3 pathways. That is remarkable. And that stands as an inspiration for all of us. We can all do that. You were supposed to summarize your skills. And you told us, I'm still growing in my skills. I have a safety net though, and I won't fall. Just try it. Give that speech. Go on a date with yourself. That was inspirational. And to celebrate your achievements, the third item you were required to do, your enthusiasm is proof of your pride in your speaking achievements. Congratulations. Please stay with us, even though you're in UK and we're going to change our formats. We are all inspired by your speeches. Thank you. Over to you, Vicki.
Thank you. Realized I was like on mute. Okay. Next up is our timer. Eric, could you give us the times?
Be my pleasure. There is nothing prosaic about this job. You got Zoom, you got mute, unmute, you've got timing. Christina's doing all counting. Is she going to get called upon? Am I going to have to do that? Holy cow. I did get some times. Jackie, your speech was 12:32. Your table topics was 2:01. Mary, your table topics was 1:56. And you enjoyed your evaluation, 4:24. Nikki, your table topics was 1:41. Steve, 1:57. Pat, 2:06. Christina, 1:42. And Lloyd, 1:46. So good job. And I will pass it back to Vicki.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing about our word of the day and our grammatical usage. Pat.
You all did a great job on word of the day. Steve used it twice, Mary used it once, Eric used it once, and Selena is the champion in that she used it 3 times. So I was pleased to know that it wasn't an orphan and it was used. Now, in terms of the use of language, it was in Jackie's speech that it was really used up the gazinga. She talked about pathways, like a first date that was a setup. I would never have made that analogy. I just loved it. She talked about pathways had given me a gift. This is part of the dating profile. She shared with us a British word, bespoke, which for the Brits means common, if I understood her very well. And then she said she was taking a deep dive into what I think is funny. Taking a deep dive into what I think is funny. She talked about table topics on steroids. Then she talked about going out in a blaze of glory and crash and burn, which would be the least desirable alternative. And one of the things that she did very nicely, as I said in the beginning, she talked about it was like a first date that was a setup. And when she closed her speech, she said to all of us, so go on a date with pathways. Lovely connection of the opening phrase and the closing phrase. I didn't find anyone else who used anything particularly elegant. There were no real grammatical errors. So it was a lovely evening of Toastmasters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is our awe counter, Christina.
Thank you, Vicki. Great job tonight. Steve, Pat, Selena, Eric, all clean. Lloyd, 2 us, 1 I mean. Mary, 2 sentences started with and. Vicki, 2 ums. 4 sentences started with and. Jackie, 2 sentences started with and, 1 well, and 1 repetition, the. That's it. Good job, everyone.
Thank you so much. Yes, with this platform, it seems to really work out. I like how we're able to jump on. If we need to fill roles, we're able to do that quickly. It's just amazing how the Zoom platform seems to work quite well for Toastmasters meetings, although I know we're all anxious to get in person as well. Selena, you did a great job of including everybody in your table topics and making sure that everybody had a chance to speak. I appreciate that. You had some really great, fun questions. So thank you for putting some thought into that. I appreciate it. My team members, I thank you. And Jackie, great speech. Congratulations. Turning it back over to let me look at the agenda because we have different roles if it's depending on which club I'm in. So who are we going to? We're going to Jackie.
Thank you, Vicki. We appreciate you being here and filling in. By the way, you have so many hats that you wear, and it is so fun to have you in our group tonight. I think I speak for all of us when I say that. Lloyd, would you like to add anything? I'm guessing we're not going to do best speaker of the night, or we could.
You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who would we pick?
Lloyd then.
Yeah. Go ahead and send me your votes if you want. In the meantime, we are rapidly approaching the end of the Toastmasters year, which is next Wednesday, I guess, the 30th. So that will get us through another one. It was predicted by the district leadership when this club was chartered that it would not last the first year. And the club of that former district governor is now out of business, and we're still going. So I guess, an illustration of karma, perhaps. So Eric, you and Christina remember Laura Legendary, right? She was one of the charterers, and she told me that the district governor at the time said, yeah, you're wasting your time. You'll never make it go over in a dinky place like Wenatchee.
Interesting.
Okay, it appears that almost everybody has voted, if not a majority have voted, and our winner tonight is Jackie.
Aw, I love you guys. I have to say, I attended one day of the district training over here because they are proceeding as if I am area advisor, but I am not able to be area advisor if I go further in the competition.
Mhm.
And I have to say, I hope I go on for more reasons than one, because I was comparing the district leadership, Vicki, to you and the trio, and I am just here to say, I feel like I've gotten spoiled in my interactions with the trio from our district because they don't compare. It wasn't warm and friendly, and I left feeling like, oh, I love District 9. I love Vicki. So I just have to say, we are so lucky to have you in the position that you're in as a district leader. You're amazing. All of you guys are amazing. I love you. I miss you.
Thank you. Yes, Cascade Speakeasy does spoil us as Toastmasters. I'll tell you that much.
There are huge differences among clubs and whatnot. Even here in District 9, I can think of a couple of clubs that are very, very formal. I mean, the meetings run according to parliamentary procedure and the whole thing. I would not have come back to the Speakeasy the second time if that were the case, but there is a separate club culture for every club, and they're wildly different from one another. The basic outline's the same, but you never quite know what you're going to see when you
Yeah.
get on the scene.
And from division to district to,
Mhm.
because the clubs here that I visited are wonderful. The division leader is fabulous, but the district leadership, like calling people out. One gal is an incoming area director. She almost left in tears because she sent a private message about something to the district director, and the district director called her out in front of everybody, just stuff like that. And I didn't know I wasn't allowed to speak because I'm not technically incoming. And so when my group was coming forward talking with our success plans, I don't want to make us go over and talking about this, but and I thought, oh, I will pitch in, do my part as being part of the team. And quality growth gal was like, respectfully, you can't talk. It was just like a shut you down. And I was like, okay, I'm going off screen. Why did I even come? It was just, it was not a friendly atmosphere. And everyone in my division agreed. And our division leader was like, that's not the way it's going to be in our division, guys. We're all about relationships. So I was like, yes, okay. I still hope I go to the world championships though. Because I want to represent awesome district 9.
Make sure that nobody officially says you are an area director next year. And make sure your name doesn't appear on a list or anything until after you hear the word.
I double checked with them and triple checked with them. And I think that's probably why they're being so about it. But yeah, I appreciate that, Lloyd, because that's something I've been thinking about these past couple weeks. All right, we got to end. I'm sure Steve is saying goodbye. Thank you so much for a